Good morning. My name is Ann Sullivan. I'm an occupational therapist, and today I'm going to talk to you about autism, in particular, the challenges associated with transitioning into adolescence and adulthood. So first, I'm going to talk to you about what is autism. Autism spectrum disorder is characterized by problems in social communication difficulties as well as repetitive and restrictive behaviors. So I'll go into that a little bit. With social communication problems, there's problems with social and emotional reciprocity. That means there's problems with that give and take, sharing of interests, sharing of emotions, initiating and even responding to social interactions. Also, there's difficulty with nonverbal communication. At least 70% of our communication is nonverbal, meaning eye contact, facial expressions, hand gestures, body language. There can be a really difficult time both creating these nonverbal communication cues as well as interpreting them. So that means that even if they're highly verbal, there's a real difficult time interpreting the nonverbal portion of our communication. It's also a difficult time developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. Difficult time making friends, keeping friends, sometimes even a lack of interest in peers. And then there can be a difficult time adjusting the behavior that we need to portray as appropriate in different contexts. And then in the area of the restrictive repetitive behaviors, interests, and activity, there's some areas that can be seen more or less with different people of autism. One is there can be repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, which means they may be stimming or having movements that they do over and over again, or lining up of objects or making a certain sound or word or phrase over and over again. There can also be an insistence on the sameness, inflexibility with routines, difficulty with transitions. There can be a real difficult time with they can insist on things being the same every time, taking the same route when you're driving somewhere or eating the same foods every day, and tend to have a difficult time with managing the flexibility with change. There can also be highly restrictive, fixated interests. These special interests can be very intense and focused. These can look like knowing everything about every Pokemon character, or memorizing maps, or knowing every president of the United States and every detail of information about them. These interests can be very much a strength, but they can also have a difficulty being broadening their horizons, as well as sharing those special interests with others. Now, in the year 2000, the CDC reported that currently 1 in 54 children is diagnosed with autism. And over the past 20 years, that prevalence rate has been increasing. So as we move forward, the number of people with autism transitioning into adulthood is going to be growing. And so the CDC is also reporting that for adults with autism, there's higher rates of unemployment and underemployment, low participation in education beyond high school, high rates of living with a family and not moving out into their independent living, and little opportunity for community involvement. Typically in adolescence, there are a lot of changes that go on for a typical adolescent as they grow and change with their brains and their bodies to meet different challenges, and as they really go through a transition of self-differentiating from being a part of their family to really developing their own identity into their own individual human that they want to be. When someone has autism, this can be complicated because there's in the physical changes that go on during adolescence. There's a lot of body changes, brain changes, hormone changes, and this can show up as a lot of emotional regulation difficulties as the hormones change, as well as not really understanding that social and communication part of that changes when you're portraying a different body image as you grow. People have different expectations if you look like a grown-up. Cognitively, there are a lot of academic demands during the adolescent period, as well as developing competence in life skills. These take a lot of executive functioning skills, such as problem solving, time management, scheduling, being able to manage all the different things that you're expected to do. These are challenging for people with autism. So as they hit the point in time where they're more challenged by this executive functioning, then they will have a harder and harder time developing the skills that are typical at that age period. Socially, typically in adolescence, the social interaction and the peer interaction is of high importance, as adolescents tend to take into account the peer influence much more so than any other influence in their lives. And with the lack of peer interaction and that lack of making and keeping friends and the lack of that ability to interact well, this social development piece in adolescence is very difficult for people with autism. Now, the communication in adolescence is also a higher demand. Adolescents are expected to be able to communicate their own ideas and thoughts, and in a variety of different contexts. And you may communicate a different way when you're with your peers, as with you're with a teacher, as with you're with an employer. So learning all of the complexities of that communication is also challenging. Now, when these adolescents graduate from high school, a lot of their supports and therapies vanish. In the community, there is just not as much support for adolescents and young adults with autism once they graduate high school. There's no mandated special education anymore. So as they move out into the world, they're facing a lot of difficulties with bridging this gap from being a child in the home to being an adult. And this is where I think occupational therapy can play a really important role in helping maximize the participation in their occupations. This is in life skill development, independent living skill development, such as managing their hygiene and grooming and how they're portraying themselves to the world, as well as managing all these responsibilities and time management and money management, medication management, all of these responsibilities that come about. Also addressing the education and the work employment, those difficulties that happen in those different contexts with those specific expectations that are needed. Also, we need to address the social participation in the community and finding ways to be able to have a full round life and address wellness and occupational balance for these young adults with autism. Anyway, I hope that I brought some ideas to mind. Thank you for learning about autism. And I hope you take away from this the importance of creating therapy and services that can really help with this transition to adulthood for young adults with autism. Thank you.